William Spence, who was one of the major trade unionist figures in this late 19th century Australian nationalism, and went on to be influential, after Federation as well. And a quote from him to get a feel for their politics. He's saying this, by the way, while conceding that, yeah, there are some liberal, conservative elements in Australian politics that also did politically support the White Australia policy. But his stance is that the anti-socialist is invariably, as I quote, the most unpatriotic person to be found. He belongs to the stinking fish party. If he cannot get his own stupid way, he denounces the country in which he has done so well. The bedrock of the cry for a color line across the continent so that anti-socialists could boss N-words and yellow men is found in the anti-socialist nature. He is a born tyrant, and as the white Australian will not stand his tyranny, he must have a N-word to order about. There is no patriotism in the anti-socialist press, hence it barracks for anything the capitalist crowd asks for. So there was this, obviously from the laborists, this keen sense of class warfare and, a very racial concept of trade unionism, as you mentioned. This idea that there's something about being a white man was having this collective mentality. And people often flip that these days and talk about how to be a white man is to be individualistic and that all the other races are more collectivist than us. But they had this inverse perception that it was actually the white man who had this inherent virtue that all for one and one for all was their kind of principle, and as opposed to the pursuit of individual advantage, this kind of rejection of bourgeois morality. So that was a strong component. Obviously, the Australian Labor Party was formed out of that worldview and that tendency. But at the same time, you also had more liberal nationalist elements like H.B. Higgins, who went on to become Attorney General and was massively influential in the early politics of federal Australia and the formation of the White Australia policy, a staunch advocate. You have Alfred Deakin, Australia's second Prime Minister, one of the most influential Prime Ministers in Australian history, really set the tone for the early phase of Australian politics, the so-called Australian settlement. Alfred Deakin, in his maiden speech to Parliament, declared Australia to be an Aryan Christian nation. His racial identitarianism and his religious faith were really front and center of his political project. They were the protectionist party. So they opposed themselves to the pro-British Empire free traders. They aligned themselves with colonial white Australians and their interests, but they weren't so much trade unionists. Instead, they had this liberal democratic conception of nationalism. But nevertheless, they were also integral in the formation of white Australia. But we're going to get into the story of Federation now. I'll turn it back to you. But once Federation